Alright, hello. So this is going to be part 2 of the dock. I've been playing with trying to make the big boats, but I still just can't really get them right yet. So we're going to leave the boat shed and the larger boat for a little while, just so I can practice. And for now, we're going to do the 2 small boats and the interior of the house. So first we need to do the jetty for the small boats. So we need that little, essentially the jetty is just a very small dock that we're attaching to the larger sort of dock / boardwalk area, and this is where you actually onboard, offboard for the boats. So for this I have used the infinite horizontal logs, and I've gone 3 wide and I think about 6 long. Sometimes you have to play with them like a lot of infinite blocks to make them stack, but if you just go further out than you need, they will kind of infinitely stack together and then you can just chip them back. So after that, I just attached a single length of stairs, and then I grabbed some of the iron blocks and I wrapped them around from the railing over and around to the base just to make it look a little bit more solid. And I've changed that railing just from what we originally had, which was the prison wall and the sooty tile, and we've changed it to the iron block and the dyed black fortifications. It did look a little bit too sort of samey before, so this just breaks up the textures a little bit. So one of the hardest things I've found with boats, and something I'm still struggling with, is the placement. It can be really hard to get them on a water level where it sort of looks right. I recommend, if possible, try and do your boat practice on land, and if where you want it is within a settlement area, you can blueprint it over, which will make it a little bit easier. Here we can't, because these boats technically are outside of that settlement area. Placement too, it's hard for a few reasons, because you want the boat to look like it's floating, which is harder than it seems, I'm realizing. I tried placing the floor that you stand on first as opposed to the bottom of the boat, but I've had limited success with that, as the bottom ended up looking not right, and as I built I realized the underneath of the boat is surprisingly important, even though you don't see it that much. But the problem with starting from the bottom that I had was it's hard to gauge how far you need to go out, so you don't know exactly where the lip is going to end up, which can make it hard if you're attaching it to a dock. Often though, like I'm doing here with the dock, you're going to need a jetty too. So what I didn't do, and that I recommend maybe you try, is if you've got a dock and you need those little sort of jetty offboard areas, build the boats first and then build the jetty, because that way, see, what I struggled with here was trying to have it just 1 or 2 blocks away from the jetty, because I wasn't sure exactly how far I needed to go out from the base. So if you build the boat first then the jetty, it may be a little less hard than it was for me. I made the raft second, but we'll do it first because it's the smaller boat. And I was learning as I go, so I think I did it all a little bit backwards, but I'm going to try and edit it to make it make sense. So I knew I wanted a square raft with a central small sail, so I knew I had to plan around that central sail. So I needed 1 centre block with a 1 block border around that to make the actual raft space that you sit on. I knew I wanted to use the slimes, I just didn't know exactly how. So this ended up being placed all on the top level of the water, the slimes and the basic bridge. They need to be placed on a block, so I did have to build a scaffold. Remember, especially underwater, just to try and work with bright colours so it's easier to knock them out. And I ended up having to build a couple of levels because I wasn't exactly sure. It's always hard with the eye to get it exactly floating, but once I had it right, I could then build up. So once I had that space, I needed to make it look more like a raft. So to tie it together, I decided to use the brick border. The only problem for me for the brick border is it can't be dyed, so it's kind of limited in terms of the colour scheme that looks good with it. I ended up going with dyeing the slimes blue, even though they are blue. When you dye them, they go a navy blue. I kind of liked it. I actually do like the navy, but I just think it doesn't suit the houses behind it, funnily enough. So I'm going to go back later and change it to white, but for now it's going to be navy. The mast as well is the last thing. So that will be the last bit we do, and it's going to be 5 blocks high. Just standard wooden fencing is great for this because it will always have the little block out that connects it to the next block. So for a simple sail like this, if you just go, say, one off the ground and go one against the wooden fence, and then one out a few, and then at the top just go back in towards the fence. Because it grabs, it really helps give it that sail effect. And here I ended up just putting a lantern on the top. And once you put all that together, it's one of those things where it's a lot of weird stuff together, but once you put it in the right context, it starts to look like what it's supposed to. So now that we've done the raft, we'll go on to the bigger boat of the two, but still a pretty small boat. So it's easier with these boats, I've found, to start with the bottom. I've just struggled with the big boats to start with the very bottom. So for this one, we wanted to do the very base, and it can, again, be really hard to actually work out where that's going to be. I suggest going further down than you anticipate, because you can always go up, where it's a little harder if you start too high to go down and it looks right. So I made a gamble of where I wanted it to be, and then I done 2 rows and I lined the sides with brackets. And we need to remember that the boat's going to be wider at the top than it is here, so we need to account for that when we're placing it. And you'll see that I kind of go back and forward with how many blocks long it is, because I'm sort of trying to imagine how many blocks the front and back will need, and we don't want it looking like it's crashing into the dock. So as well, the reason I've made sure it's a 2 wide base is because I know I want to attach the water wheel as a motor, and I know that's 4 wide, so I wanted a 2 wide base that I could have as an eventual 4 wide space to attach the water wheel to, and I had to create a scaffold to put it on first. As well, with the sides, I started with the green wood, but I decided I wanted to use the Citadel wall battlement, so I replaced the green wood and then just put green wood on top of those, and chiseled them down half so that you could see part of both textures, essentially. And once I add some higher blocks around behind the water wheel motor, it's starting to look more now like an actual basic boat, so I know I'm on the right track. And at this point, and I did do a few boats I scrapped, if you're not sure about it, this is probably a good time to go away, do something else, and come back in a little bit with fresh eyes, just to see if it's because you're overthinking the structure or if it really doesn't look like a boat. Alright, now for the front, I used dyed green fierce fountains. It took a bit of moving around, and originally I was going to have them together at the front, but I ended up placing them on the same level as the battlement pieces, but on either side of the front to create like a diagonal rounded effect to the front. And then I used the green wood and the flat chisel to fill in the gaps and tear it down to the battlement level. And I put a row of blocks in the front as well, preparing for the steering area. Also as well, we add an anchor, which isn't necessary obviously, but it really helps add to that boat effect. Now once we've done all this, we want to sort of create an area at the front that's going to draw the eye. So I've raised it up by a few blocks and I've diagonally chiseled them in towards the boat so that it looks like it's got that sort of curve at the front. And this is where often you'll see, I don't know what it's called, I'm going to say boat hood ornament. but usually you have that front decoration on the boat there, so we'll put something there. But like I said, look, I'm going back and forth a lot here. So now I'm going to add the blank walkway. And I've realised at this point the flat wooden roof is perfect for these plank walkways because they sit on the bottom of a block space. They're really good for this. And now going back to the front again, to decorate the front I used a magnetic block to display that serpent and fountain, and I changed the front blocks to battlement pieces to keep the same effect as the sides. Like I had mentioned, I'm going back and forth because this isn't something I'm used to building, so when you're not sure what you're doing, if you're struggling with one section, move on to something that's fun or easy that you're inspired on, and then try and go back to the bit you were working on and sort of just go between, I think, sometimes the bits you want to do and don't want to do, and slowly it sort of builds up into something. So now I've got a steering wheel and boxes, so steering wheel in the front, boxes in the back, but we want to cover, I think, for that back area. So I use planter poles. You'll need to place them from the top down with like chalk or something underneath, and then I've just used the flat teak tiling for the roof, but I made sure just to alternate the directions to give it some texture, so I've got it going one way on the sides and another way in the middle. And I placed a little bed down in there. I just wanted to have a general theme of that small trade boat. So now we're going to do the interior of the merchant house. Like I said, go back and forth between the things you like, so this is going to get me inspired to keep going. So for decorating the inside, I won't go into great detail about like where everything's placed. I just wanted to talk a little bit more, and I am trying to work out how to do a video for it. I just want to talk a little bit about decorating and sort of coming up with a story before you start decorating to help you get an idea. So, you know, sometimes all the inspiration you need for like to do the inside of a building is just, you know, colors or certain motifs. But if you want, especially with houses, if you want it to look sort of lived in or like it's got some sort of hidden details, you need to ask yourself some questions about why the space is the way it is. So what I mean by that is, who lives there? Why is everything in there the way it is? So here we know merchants are going to be living in here. So it makes sense that they would probably collect a lot of stuff that they, you know, get in from the port. Maybe they keep some of their favorite pieces and, you know, keep them in the house, plus storage as well for some of their stock. So we can think about it and imagine that they are around all this stuff all the time, so they might not mind the clutter. Plus as well, you know, are they a couple, are they not? These guys aren't, so we're going to have the beds separate. And we're going to use the modern sort of, I'm not sure what they're called, but they're the, like the TV cabinet looking things. And they're interesting because they technically only take up one square. And it can be quite hard to place things around. So using the shifting sands with these can make it a lot easier to place all the bits and pieces. And so again, with like details, I put some books and like a fancy treasure chest in there because I'm figuring maybe that's where they keep like their money and their books. So it is only a little detail, but putting those wooden brackets at the end, just up above the beds, helps add to that sort of closed in feeling. And we want this place to feel sort of like small and eclectic and like it's got a lot of stuff. And the other thing as well here you can see is the interior of the trading post. We've done a little bit in the first part, but just wanted to show that, you know, you can use benches, workbenches and stuff as decorations, but do keep in mind you do have a limit on them. I'm starting to hit my limit, so don't use too many of them. And so that'll be it for this part. In the last part, we'll do the big boathouse and a big boat, or at least a medium-sized boat, and finish decorating the dock. That might take a little while because I do want to get a new version of the island up, so I'm just sort of tidying up and finishing a lot of projects right now. I'm putting in some houses. I might put some videos up for those. But the last part might be about a week away, but you know, like I've said, if anyone wants to see any particular tutorials or videos or anything, please just let me know. All right, bye.